The type of things that we're going to discuss today, I used to myself be a little bit skeptical of. And that was because it used to scare me.
I built up a 7-figure business while working less than 4 hours a day, yet I was so deeply depressed, like that state of just numb.
Sam went from fantasy football leagues and frat life to full moon ceremonies and breath work.
When I left the fantasy football league, my best friends pretty much disowned me. I would jokingly refer to myself as a recovering bro. A lot of us are so disconnected from our feelings because when we are expressing ourselves as a baby, a toddler, a little kid, we're told like, hey, you're making a scene, you're being too much, so we're taught to not feel.
So many people use breathing as get rid of the feeling.
Now you're bypassing. Emotions are energy in motion. There's the 90-second rule that scientifically shows that we can move through them in as little as 90 seconds.
And it's free.
Yeah.
It's free. Hello, you guys, and welcome back to the Ambitious Podcast. So today I'm very excited to introduce to you an incredible guest who I will be very honest. The type of things that we're going to discuss today, I used to myself, admittedly, be a little bit skeptical of. And that was because it used to scare me and I would oftentimes roll my eyes. And that's because today is really an invitation for those who've been curious to integrate a little bit more flow within their business, a little bit more spirituality, a little bit more balance. And so today we are talking all things breath work, soul-centered practices, and how to integrate those within your business and within your life. Today I am joined by Sam, who's the author of Soul Life Balance, a guide to igniting and integrating spiritual awakenings. Sam built a 7-figure business while working less than 4 hours a day and was named Silicon Valley's 40 under 40 list and had all the external markers of success. But despite having complete financial freedom, he found himself deeply numb and depressed, which led him on a transformative journey through breathwork, plant medicine, and spiritual awakening. What I love about Sam's approach personally is the fact that he bridges practical understanding with the spiritual. And as somebody who is like a very much a strategy and structure nerd, this is something that really landed for me. He is not by any means asking you to abandon logic or abandon strategy, but rather to integrate both your inner world and your outer world that is happening in your life and in your business to truly have what he calls soul life balance. He is also a master practitioner in NLP, a yoga instructor, and has held space in over 1,000 medicine ceremonies. So let's get into a little bit of what you're going to learn today. First, we talk about why traditional work-life balance is actually double yang energy and keeping you stuck in human doing versus human being. We discuss the recovering bro journey, how Sam went from fantasy football leagues and frat life to full moon ceremonies and breath work, and with this, lost friends in the process. His revolutionary breath framework that he's going to teach you today on how to move through emotions in 90 seconds using science-backed techniques instead of bypassing them. He discusses the differences between breathwork exercises that are used to calm your nervous system versus those that are used to release stored trauma and why most people are doing breathwork wrong, and how to tell if you're spiritually bypassing versus actually listening to your intuition when you want to skip to your commitments. The ninja breathing technique is also something he's going to teach today and how you can use it in heated conversations or meetings in a way no one will notice. We did this live on this call together, and he literally did this live, this breathing technique with me on this, and it was incredible. I cannot wait for you to learn this. Breathwork, I will say, has had a massive impact on my journey. I used to be very skeptical, as I said. And with that, in leaning in, I've really seen the power of what this resource that is free and available to you can do for you. And we just talk about so many incredible things in today's episode. You are going to feel spiritually, emotionally lifted in a way that I cannot describe after listening to this today. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Alrighty, you guys, welcome back to Ambitious. I am so excited today. We were just chatting before we started pressing record, and I was saying how many of the things we're going to talk about today were things that I used to be scared of or I used to be skeptical of. And so I'm really excited to bring that conversation and invitation for you today of all these incredible topics, a lot of them around burnout, understanding balance, tapping into our spirituality and our soul, breath work, and so many other things. So Sam, welcome to Ambitious.
Kate, so good to see you. It's been a while. I'm excited we're doing this, and thank you so much for bringing me on your podcast.
Yeah, of course. We did a an episode on his show, which was awesome as well. If you guys want to check that out, we'll link that in the show notes for you so you can listen there too. Sam, I feel like I want to dive right into the meat of it because I feel like there's so many. I'm a nerd for frameworks or structures, and you have so many incredible ones. So I'm just excited to dive right in. Your book talks about soul life balance. And for the woman listening to this, we often hear the idea of work life balance, but I would love for you to unpack what is soul life balance? And also for you as an entrepreneur, how did that kind of come up? How did that principle kind of get discovered?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember back in high school, I grew up in Northern California, just south of Silicon Valley. I remember in high school and from 2002 to 2006, that's when I was in high school, being like, man, when I grow up, I just want work-life balance. I don't really know what it is, but I just want that thing of work-life balance, right? So long story short, I ended up building a seven-figure business in the promotional products industry. And that was culminated in 2019 when I was 31. I was named to my industry's Rising Stars. I was named to Silicon Valley's 40 Under 40 list, a list of movers and shakers in Silicon Valley. And this is a guy just putting logos on things in Silicon Valley, nothing special at all. The differentiator was really networking with young professionals, being on boards of nonprofits. And I had a media network with like 5 podcasts on the network back in 2017. We did an annual event at eBay's headquarters called Pitch Tank, kind of our version of Shark Tank.
Mm.
So I had all these accolades. I built up a seven-figure business while working less than 4 hours a day, no employees. Like back then, I was known as the VA guy, the virtual assistant guy. Not anything I set out to be known for, but people would ask me, like, how are you able to do so much? Because I wrote my first 3 books in a year around that time as
Wow.
well. Yeah, so I had a lot going on, and I'd be like VAs, and people would be like, "What's that?" I'm like, "A virtual assistant," right? So,
Yeah.
picture that I'm painting here is like literally had financial freedom with a seven-figure business, was crushing it on all accounts, and just working a few hours a day. Yet I was so deeply depressed, like that state of just numb. And that's when a breathwork journey first found me, then ayahuasca, and then my journey really went super deep down the spiritual path, which then morphed in transition more to mental and emotional health, really from a scientific perspective. So it's been 6 years now. And the message of soul life balance came through back in April of 2019. And I didn't really know what it was. I figured, I got to figure out what this thing is. I've been off with work life balance. And when the pandemics hit or the lockdowns hit the next year, and a lot of people are writing their first book, I already had the vision of writing a book called Soul Life Balance. But it was actually an incredibly close friend, a woman, a good friend of mine, that reflected back to me back then. She was like, maybe it's time for you to slow down, Sam, with all the lockdowns. Cause I really had that entrepreneurial itch that was like, it's go time, put the pedal to the metal. This is time for me, write the book. Right. And it was so
Yeah.
important to have those like close women in my life that were
Yeah.
so deeply connected to their intuition to be those vessels of messengers to me to offer the invitation of slowing down. And it was very uncomfortable. Long story short, within a couple of years, I end up writing and publishing that book, Soul Life Balance. And the basic idea of soul life balance is a reframe of work life balance. And how I typically teach it when I teach on stage, either keynotes or workshops, presentations, is looking at the archetypal energy of the yin and yang or yang, because most of us are familiar with that symbol, right? But
Mhm.
a lot of people don't actually know what it means. And the light side represents the outer world of the obligations and responsibilities. It's the human doing. And the dark side is our inner world, which I like to say is our mental and emotional health. If you want to go deeper and say your connection to your religion or spirituality, that's
Mm.
great. But like, let's just start with your connection to
Yeah.
your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
So now, if we take these energies and we apply them to work life balance, it becomes so abundantly obvious that work life balance is double yang. That's to say that it's double outer world of responsibilities, obligations, and the human doing as opposed to the innate essence of our human being. So soul life balance is a reprioritization of work life balance where we prioritize our inner world of our mental and emotional health first while recategorizing work as a part of life.
Okay. So much to unpack there. So good.
Totally.
Okay. I know anyone listening is thinking, "Were you always into this?" Because I think as you noted there, like, you're like, "Okay, I have this kind of, like, almost like awakening, really,
Hmm.
of realizing there's a whole other way that I could be doing business, could be doing life, my experience of this could be." But I know for many who haven't dipped their toe into that yet, to your point earlier, it can feel very intimidating. Slow down. You're like, "It kinda scared me." Like, Sam before, what did he look like? How is he operating in the quote unquote work-life balance or lack thereof?
The subtitle to Soul Life Balance is a guide to igniting and integrating spiritual awakenings. So, yes, very
Mm,
much an awakening. And the amazing author and spiritual teacher Adyashanti talks about the I got it, I lost it phenomena. And the idea is like when we go through this awakening unfolding, it's just that. It's an unfolding. We might have like that one moment or that one peak experience, but then it's about the integration there. And we're going to go through this phenomena of like, I got it, I lost it, meaning like, I got it. I understand the secrets of the universe. I feel awakened, but then there's going to
yeah.
be other times like, what happened? Right. So at the time of me going down this path and me shifting, not just like who I am by myself and around my friends and family, but also the version of myself that's showing up on social media,
Mm,
total 180, very, very, very different person. I remember getting a message at a full moon ceremony, and for me to even go to a full moon ceremony was like, I don't know what this thing is. I've been
yeah.
doing transcendental meditation for maybe a year, so TM, and I've been going yoga classes for maybe about a year or so. But I just feel, I didn't even have the language to say feel called. I just had this
Mm,
inner knowing that I was supposed to go to like this full moon ceremony. And then in that, it came that I needed to leave the fantasy football league I was in. And I was
mm,
31 years old. I was still in the same fantasy football league with my best friends from college. A lot of them played like, high school football and like captains of their team, all stars. And I was never like a jock or anything like that, but like I very much had that persona. Like in college, we were the top frat. I lived above the most popular bar in town. I repped Monster Energy drinks, a spring break trip, like the whole thing, right? So
yeah.
when I left the fantasy football league, my best friends pretty much disowned me, and they said like all the like abusive or whatever type of words you want to paint in your picture, and I
Yeah.
didn't talk to them for a couple of years, and here we are 6 years later, and I talk to them every now and then.
Mm,
Point being though, as I started to integrate this all and like who I was showing up as, I would jokingly refer to myself as a recovering bro, because I needed to say that to be like, hey, I was cool. I am cool. I'm not like this flowery hippie guy. Like I needed to have that transition
yeah.
piece to really help me embrace it. And like that only lasted maybe a year or so, like back in 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, total 1A, very different person.
And I feel like there's just such an identity shift in that because I feel like it's also the while you're obviously welcoming all of what you could be as a person or entrepreneur, you're also unlearning all of who you were. And so I'm curious like for that catalyst to go into that side of you because I'm thinking for the person listening, they're very potentially in their masculine the idea of maybe like yoga or meditation feels new to them, let alone diving into anything like breath work or the words of spirituality. They think, okay, like, is this religion? Is this energy? Are we talking crystals? Like, I know there's a big spectrum of what that can mean for people. But for you, the catalyst for this, would you say that there was like a situation or wasn't an experience that quote unquote called you into it? Or was it kind of like almost like a matter of all of these little breaks in the glass that eventually shattered and kind of led to this like evolution of who obviously you are today?
That's such a great question. I mean, I had first my breathwork journey, which was like about an hour and a half one on one with a facilitator, just breathing in a specific kind of way to release trauma stored in the body. And I like
Mhm.
to visualize it like this: when a lion is chasing a gazelle in the wild, and most of us have seen these videos, if the gazelle is lucky enough to get away, it shakes and convulses because it allows itself to release that trauma it just experienced. But a lot of us are so disconnected and disassociated from our feelings typically from a young age, because when we are expressing ourselves as a baby, a toddler, a little kid, whatever it might be, we're told like, hey, you're making a scene, you're being too much. So we're taught
Mm,
to not feel. And then that becomes conditioned into us, right? So kind of what you
right.
were saying before about the unprogramming. So yeah, definitely the breathwork journey was the first piece. A week after that, I sat with ayahuasca, plant medicine, very powerful psychedelic for healing. And those two experiences were the big catalysts. And especially working with plant and earth medicines, it can really help you to do that quote unquote shadow work. As you know, 95% of our awareness we don't have access to. That's our subconscious mind. So doing our shadow work, the term coined by the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, is basically to make the unconscious conscious. So all that 95% we're not aware of, now having conscious awareness to that. It's very intimidating. It's very scary. I was at rock bottom. So I was like, literally, like, it wasn't even a matter of like how to surrender. It was like I was at the ultimate place, like
Like you had no
I'm giving
choice.
in. Yeah, I had no
Yeah.
choice.
Yep.
Exactly. And from there, it gave me the clarity on how to move forward. So those were like really the pivotal moments for sure.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends and peers who I've never done ayahuasca, but I've had a lot of friends and peers who have, and they said it was really this like life altering experience. And I'm thinking for the person listening who's maybe, using this as an invitation to say, okay, maybe that nudge or that call to it, they're using this as an invitation to say, maybe I go down that. But I'm also thinking the other side of if someone's like, okay, maybe I am previous Sam listening to this.
Hmm.
And I know that I want to start to integrate more of this soul life balance, but I'm not quite sure if I need a big catalyst for that to happen? Or are there invitations for us to take to kind of say, okay, great, the door's a little bit open, let's explore. And if so, how do we do that? If we're coming from a place of being super masculine, in the masculine, overdoing it, as you said, we've got free space, great, I'm gonna write a book. Like, using those opportunities, how do we go from that kind of operation system to inviting ourselves into this? Or do you think, to your point, you need a big catalyst to kind of start down that path typically?
Yeah, it's going to be different for different people. I think a lot of times, to have that big catalyst, we have to be doing the work to prepare ourselves for it. And psyche kind of is aware of that. And that's when the calling will come. Like in my example, I was already doing yoga and TM. So I was starting to build those tools. So to your
Right.
point, for anyone that's trying to go from a human doing to a human being, it can be very uncomfortable and bring a lot of anxiety in to just be present and
Mm,
not check your phone, not be journaling, right? Or just like to be in the moment. And the best thing you can do to really train yourself for that is to get out in nature and just sit and be. And, I've worked with plenty of people like clients that are in New York City being like, oh, but I live in New York or I live in a city. I can't really do it. And I'm like, we live in nature. Yes, we have these buildings, but all you have to
yeah.
do is walk outside. Like it doesn't matter if it's concrete jungle. It's as
Yeah.
simple as seeing the bird or a squirrel or a pigeon or noticing the shift in the wind. Like these small little moments can have such a pivotal impact in your day. So
Yeah.
that's a great way to go from a human doing to a human being. But for most of us, like when you wake up first thing in the morning, just take 3 deep breaths. About 90% of the time when I wake up, I do at least 10 minutes of breath work in bed before I even get out of bed. But
Mm,
if I'm not going to do that, I can at least take 3 deep breaths. And anyone can take 3 deep breaths and ask themselves, like, how do I feel in this moment? What do I want to experience today? For a year, I was not that I'm done with it, but I was going really deep on like learning to love myself because I realized how much like self hate I had. And I don't even use the word hate, I use the word strongly dislike. But for
mm,
myself, I would use the word hate. And I had to wake up, not had to, but I would wake up every morning and when I fell asleep, just saying I love myself and finding that gratitude, breathing into it. And then some other tools are the breath process, the framework, the acronym you alluded to earlier. And the foundation of that is that our body actually has a 90-second physiological response when we experience an emotion. It's science. There's a neuroanatomist named Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor that made this famous, and it's called the 90-second rule. So it teaches that our body has a physical response when we experience an emotion. And if we don't allow ourselves to feel that emotion, then that emotion, which is energy in motion, gets stuck and stored in the body. And then we start a new thought loop that keeps us stuck in that same emotion over and over because we're disassociated. So the breath framework teaches what you can actually do in those 90 seconds.
Mm. Well, I wanted to, like you just said something that I feel like is really different from what you hear a lot. Because when we hear about doing inner work, we think you mentioned journaling. And something that instantly came up for me is in the pursuit of someone trying to find themselves, can we also hide in the tools that could help us? And what I'm
Oh,
thinking about this is like, yes, journaling. Obviously, we know, and I've talked about journaling on other episodes, like it's so impactful. But I'm also thinking the distinction between the doing and being. If someone is trying to be, can we hide in the tools that might help us be, but by doing them instead of being in them?
100%. And this is something that I've lived experience in, and I think is really going to resonate with those of you listening. Like when I first learned about all this stuff, it was like, okay, I'm going to start off my morning and do some breath work, do some meditation after that, journal about my experience. For sure, I'm going outside to get that vitamin D, and I'm going to have my lemon water with ACV, apple cider vinegar. And it became like a check, 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 check.
Yeah.
And it's like, all
Yeah.
right, to your point, like you're turning the being into the doing. And I
Mm.
think that is amazing training wheels when you first get started, because it's very important to explore and see, like, okay, do I like yoga? Oh, I do like yoga. Well, do I like this kind of yoga versus that kind of yoga? Because vinyasa is very different than restorative and very different from 26, right? There's so, or Iyengar and all these different styles. So finding which one within that niche of like asana of movement, or journaling. Okay, there's the author from The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron, the daily pages, that's what it's called.
Mm.
3 pages of just not letting the pen stop for 3 pages or 20 minutes, whichever comes first. Or do I like journaling with a specific prompt, right? There's so many
Mm.
different variations. So yes, we can look at like journaling versus breath work versus meditation versus yoga, or all these, or ice baths, which I know you and I both love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's great at first if you need to approach it as a to-do list, and also notice if you are approaching it as a to-do list. And if you find, this is key, if you find that you're shaming yourself at any point, whether it's this or anything else, instead of getting stuck in that frequency of shame, you celebrate that awareness that you just built around it, then you reframe it. And as it relates to this specific example with those tools being a to-do list, the reason why it's okay to do it when you're first starting off with like training wheels, like I said, is because now you're understanding which ones you like and which of those tools you would use for how you're feeling in specific moments.
Mm. Well, I'm wondering in that because I'm thinking if someone's newer to this or maybe they're already dabbling in it. And even for me, like exactly what you just said, I remember I was really burnt out and I was like exactly like you're saying, something had to change. Like I had to take time off of work. I thought, okay, maybe it's a vitamin thing. So I was like, I'm gonna go get IVs. And the girl was like, maybe it's more than vitamins. Maybe there's like some other things happening here. I think we need an overall wellness plan. And I was like, okay, great. So she's like, you're going to do, I think journaling would be good. I think a walk would be good, kind of giving yourself these metrics, if you will, of like a toolbox that you can go to. And so my super masculine brain at the time was like, great, wake up, breath work, red light, walk. Like it was like this. I was exhausted by the end of it because the checklist was so extensive. And in it, I'm not present at all. I'm just like,
Yeah.
"Okay, great, I journaled, like, awesome. I went into my breath work, great." Like, exactly as you said, I was checking the boxes. I would feel shame by not doing the routine because I thought, "Okay, well, this is what's supposed to help my burnout. It's supposed to help me to feel more aligned with my business, aligned with, my life. It's gonna help me with removing all these symptoms." But it actually made me more burnt out, even though I was journaling, breath work, all of the things, because it became such a to-do list, less of a practice. And so I'm curious for you, for someone who maybe is like, okay, I want to make more of these presencing practices part of my routine, but maybe they're in a place of doing it to do it. For you, do you believe it's a matter of the consistency and the reps, as you said, almost like the training wheels? Or for you, is the success of these practices really the level of presence you can have within them, less of how many you do or how long you do them?
Yeah, the last thing you said there.
Mm.
That was a great way to put it. Yeah, it's really the depth, right? Quality over quantity. One of my yoga instructors out here, this is a funny story. We were doing yoga at the beach. I live at the beach now, and this was several years ago. And we were in Warrior 2 in the sand, and she said something about like practice makes practice. And I'm standing there in Warrior 2 in the sand, and I nearly fell over being like, practice makes practice. Practice makes perfect. I was thinking about that Allen Iverson clip of
Yeah.
like, yeah, practice. We're talking about practice. It's
Yeah.
famous. But anyways, I realized within a few minutes after, not few minutes, probably like 30 seconds after that, being like, wow, just stepping back into that state of what many would call like the observer or the witness, and be like,
Mm.
well, look how
Mhm.
conditioned I am to be like, practice makes perfect. And I was like, what does practice make practice mean? And then I started to adopt that into soul life balance, because the philosophy or the practice of soul life balance is very different than how we talk about work life balance. How we talk about work life balance is like that perfection and that end destination, as opposed to soul life balance is understanding that it's a practice. And when we get off track, instead of shaming and guilting ourselves, we recognize it, then it's an opportunity to reframe and move forward. Now, the other part of what you were mentioning goes into habits, right? So I might derail this for a moment. So I want to get back to habits and what I was going to say to relate that to soul life balance. I'm actually a yoga instructor as well. And when I was in Costa Rica for my yoga teacher training, husband and wife teachers, they're amazing. Dakota Shea, he said, he was teaching us the yogic philosophy of sadhana, which teaches you about your daily spiritual practices. And it's really how you be in the journey as opposed to the destination. And when he was teaching us about sadhana, he said something I'll never forget. He said, to name your ultimate potential is to limit your ultimate potential. I'll say that again. To name your ultimate potential is to
Mm.
limit your ultimate potential. And my mind was melting, because I was like, oh my God, how many times have I named my ultimate potential and being like, build a 7-figure business, work less than 4
Yes.
hours a day, be named to this list, that list, this.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I've been limiting myself so much. So I have a worksheet basically that has like at the top, it just says ultimate potential. You don't say what it is. It's just your ultimate potential. Then different categories like physical, emotional, spiritual, things like that. And then just like, what are the daily habits and behaviors? Not necessarily spiritual, but then different habits and behaviors. Now, how habits relate to soul life balance is really, soul life balance is 6 years in the making. And what I've come to really consider over the past several months is more than like soul life balance. What it really feels like to me is soul life mindset. Because what I
Mm.
look at from everything is a perspective of both, like, we could call it the analytical or logic mind, and on the other side, the limbic brain, or we could call it looking at one side from like discernment with logic and the other side of intuition. So as we're building in these practices, like today would have been day 3 of me doing an ocean plunge, then running on the beach and running up and down the stairs. But it was raining today, and my dad stayed over, and we had 3 of our dogs with us. And it was just like, okay, this morning I'm not doing it. Like,
Yeah.
and that's okay, right? So there's definitely different scenarios that will come up where the previous self of myself, you, and many of you
Yeah.
listening, where we're so much in that doing, it's like, no, I made this commitment, I'm going to stick to that commitment. It's learning to be like, I'm not lying to myself, I'm not breaking a commitment, I'm learning
Mm.
to work with my intuition, and that's okay.
Mm. Well, I'm wondering for that as a business owner for you, it was a curiosity I had diving into all your work was based off what you're saying, soul life balance is really a matter of soul and your life harmony. Like working
Mhm.
in like it's in constant development, it's in constant movement, fluid. I think it's like to your point earlier, work-life balance assumes like achievement. It assumes like you were unbalanced and now you're balanced. And so really the basis of what you're talking about is like this constant integration and evaluation of all pieces to make sure that it's always in harmony with each other. I often talk about Like for me, I talk about work-life harmony because I don't really believe in work-life balance, but I think about it like an orchestra. Like you've got the really strong, loud instruments and you've got the quiet flutes in the back, and they're all different volumes and tones. But when it all comes together, even though they're constantly changing, it sounds beautiful. That's possible as a business owner, is like you've got the highs in different areas of your life and the lows in different areas. But if, as long as it's all harmony at the end of the day, it can still sound great for you and for your life. But a curiosity of what you just said is that if you are someone who's like, okay, I have to keep this commitment to myself. I think that as entrepreneurs, we constantly have this like undertone of shame of like, if I said I'm going to do blank, I'm going to do it. And there's also a lot of hustle culture
Mm.
and a lot of that tone that comes through that says to us, okay, like you have to keep the commitments that you set. And it's all about discipline and all of these things. And so I'm curious for you, how do you recommend people to balance this idea of leaning into intuition versus where could potentially we be hiding in, oh, well, for example, this situation this morning, where is the difference between I'm not doing it because the situation doesn't mean that I need to do it versus I'm using it as a reason to not do it? Where's that fine line of
Yeah.
where people can start to kind of figure out how to listen to that? Because I think for me, I always struggle to know, am I using this because my gut is telling me I need to rest, or am I resting because I'm using it as an excuse to not work?
Yeah, a lot of people would call it the spiritually bypassing, which I define that as using your beliefs to justify a way of being or behaving or doing,
Mm,
so being like, okay, because my dad's here today and we're still walking on the beach, but like, I know if I were to run or go in the ocean, then the dogs are going to jump out. It's just going to be a whole thing. I'm not going to do it. That's one thing. It makes sense. But then it raining, like it was pouring when we were on the beach. Now it's cleared up. This afternoon, I'm going to go back to the beach and I'm going to jump in and I'm going to do my stairs because it's cleared up.
mm.
If I were to say to myself, well, I already missed it. I only do it in the morning, and
Yeah,
now I can't do it in the
yeah.
afternoon. Now I'm like starting to spiritually bypass and use it as like an escapism almost.
Mm,
So it's a delicate balance of, a lot of times I'm working with more business and corporate demographics. So I don't
yeah.
talk about the masculine and feminine. But when we're talking about the yin and the yang or yang, the yang energy is a masculine energy and the yin is a feminine. So the feminine really is the intuition. And this isn't, as you know, and a lot of your listeners know, this isn't equated to actual like genitalia. It's an
Right.
archetypal energy, which is why I prefer to talk about yin and yang versus feminine and masculine. But point being here, like it's that masculine energy of like, okay, now I'm going to hold myself accountable and dive into that discipline. But we need both. Like if it comes to a couple hours from now when I would be doing that run and I don't feel sick at all, but like say I felt sick because I was just walking in the rain or something like that,
Yeah,
if something else came up, I'm like, no, I'm not going to push myself further because I have a flight tomorrow. I'm going on a trip for a few days and I don't want to get sick right now. Right.
yeah.
So it's this delicate balance of really using your intuition and then your logic and just kind of going back and forth and noticing when you're starting to talk yourself out of
Mm,
something and starting to get curious, what's that about? Where
mm,
else does that show up in my life as a pattern,
mm. That's a tough question because I feel like for many people, there's a lot of patterns. Like I'm thinking, if you're today supposed to go do that run in the stairs, and there's a part of you that's, if you had said, okay, great, I have to go do this, I have to do it because I said it as a commitment to myself, and that's what I said I was going to do, and I'm going to fulfill it. There's oftentimes, I find with most entrepreneurs, that you're having that level of shame based action in a lot of other areas, which is part of why the experience feels so difficult. Um, I'm curious because you mentioned it before, and I want to make sure I close the loop for everyone because it's something I definitely want to dive into, which is, you mentioned habits and you mentioned identity. How much of soul life balance is identity versus the habits? So, if I'm somebody who's version one, Sam, if
Mhm.
I'm there now and I'm wanting to learn how to have more of the integration you're talking about, having more of an enjoyable experience in life and business, more of a harmony, more of a spiritual experience with myself and an understanding of myself and how that integrates in all these pieces. Do you think that the majority of it is identity, or is it really about the habits you're taking, or really is it, how does the balance of those two pieces work? Is it about who I need to be in a moment, like you're saying, for example, with that example you just outlined of like in the moment, those moment to moment decisions? Or is it really about practices and allowing the practices to kind of unlock the identity for you if someone wants to dive
Yeah.
in?
Well said. Yeah, I think the practices do unlock the identity. Like for a long time there, going through the spiritual awakening unfolding, I had no idea
Mm,
who I was.
mm,
It's like Ram Dass's classic thing of his documentary, his book, Becoming Nobody. And it's interesting because, at the time of this recording, it's May 2025, and I'm rewatching Game of Thrones. And it's so awesome to watch Game of Thrones now post like spiritual awakening. And
mhm.
specifically for most of your listeners probably seen it. You've probably seen it, right?
I've never seen
Uh,
Game of Thrones.
okay, bad assumption.
But now I'm like, "Okay, I'm intrigued, I'm intrigued." Okay.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I try not to watch shows because I'm an all or nothing type of person. And
Yeah,
when you're all
same,
or nothing type of
same.
person, yeah, it's so easy to get caught in the
Yeah,
binging, right?
for
So
sure.
I try not to, but I am currently doing that. So one of the characters, like, she goes through this training of becoming no one. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like the spiritual evolution. And like,
Mm,
I went through a couple of years where I truly didn't feel attached to this identity. I felt so much more like as a soul than my egoic personification of who I am in this current
mhm,
incarnation. And then from there, I had to ground back in because I felt myself going a little too deep, a little too woo for where I wanted to be. And
mhm,
some people, they want to go there, and that's cool too. But I want to be able to have soul life balance, to have my
mhm,
feet in both worlds. And I wasn't able to be grounded in the human experience because I was losing myself. So, having said that, these practices really did help me to figure out who is it that I am. And then also be like, I am not the Silicon Valley entrepreneur. I'm not the breathwork practitioner. I'm not a coach. I'm not a speaker. I'm not a father. All this. It's just like I am me. And it's just like a practice in letting go of the labels, because those labels
mhm.
can really like keep us stuck, which is, I think, probably why I had trouble answering this question when you asked it the first time, because I don't really get too caught into the labels, or at least I try not to, you
Mm.
know?
Well, I'm happy you shared that because I feel like for me, like what was that? Probably like 2-ish, 3 years ago, I had never done an ice bath. I had never done breath work. I had never really been interested in meditation. I was, like, completely closed off, and I, at that time, thought I was good, like, I was fine. And I went to a mastermind, an event, and it was, like, probably, like, 100 plus people there, and they had the pairing together, which is a beautiful pairing, by the way. If you guys haven't done breathwork paired with ice bath, it's wonderful. But they had done a 60-minute breath work, and they followed it by an ice bath, and that experience of the 2 together cracked me open, and I'm really happy that you mentioned the aspects of habits because I think sometimes we're so fixated and like, okay, I'm gonna think on who I'm gonna be, and I'm trying to like, get this picture of who I am now versus who I'm gonna become. And we tune into it so much, but we don't actually necessarily put in the reps of the behavior of who that person would be to really
Mm,
feel it versus think it. And so I think to your point, even of like sitting in silence, there's an aspect of finding yourself in the practice. Like I had somebody who said, you just need to be. And I'm like, what the heck does that mean? At the time, I was so frustrated. I'm like, what the heck?
right.
They're like, you just need to be with yourself. I'm like, well, how do I know if I'm like doing it right? Like, that's the whole point is you just need to go be. So they said, take a blanket and sit in the middle of a field and just go be with yourself. And I remember thinking, like, for how long? Like, I had all these questions for how long and, like, what am I supposed to do? Do I do breath work? Do I do meditation? Like, it was still goal oriented. But I didn't have the unlock of the identity portion that you mentioned until I went and put myself in these environments and put myself in those practices. And one of the ones that was actually it eventually became a beautiful thing, but it was difficult initially, which I'm excited to dive into, is breath work because you guys have heard me talk about ice baths. I love ice baths. I know, Sam, you do too. And for me, the breathwork portion was kind of a love-hate initially because I know that breathwork is such an incredible tool for you to tune into not only your mind, but also your body. But initially, my first experience of breathwork, it was in this large room of a bunch of entrepreneurs. It was guided and it was very fast, quick breathing for a long, extended period of time. And I'll have you kind of explain the one-on-one of breathwork for anyone who's not familiar. But for myself, it was very overwhelming because it brought up a lot of emotions, a lot of physical feeling. that felt super unsafe at the time. And I remember feeling like, "Oop, breathwork's not for me. Not interested in breathwork. I'm good." And I didn't want to go anywhere near it. And I was only once I started to understand the different types of breathwork and also starting to again experience and play into those different habits or those different types that I realized there's certain styles of breathwork that I feel good with versus others that I typically need to be guided through because of again what comes up. So I'm curious for you with your experience around breath work for the person listening, if they maybe want to consider using breath work as a tool, but maybe they've tried it and they're like, I did not like the experience, or I feel like I've never gone through it before and I don't really know what I'm getting into, but I've heard of people who've experienced it and it feels like this huge experience. It could be this versus that. Where do people start when it comes to breath work? Because I know you have a framework around this.
Yeah, I love the way you teed that up. Such a good way to frame and introduce the topic. So, breathwork is very much trending now. It's obviously been around for thousands of years because it's a bodily function, and the yogis and Tibetan monks and so many other things. So, you get some people being like, "Oh, it's been around forever," and it's like, "Well, yeah, it's kind of like the psychedelic renaissance having a third wave." It's a big trending topic right now,
Yeah.
and there's so much to draw upon, and that makes it confusing. And a lot of people think of breath work, maybe not your listeners or the way you just described it, but a lot of people will think about breath work and be like, oh yeah, I've done breath work because I've done meditation or I've done a yoga class, I've tried box breathing. And what you just described is very different. So for that reason, I like to simplify things. For a while, my YouTube channel was called Spirituality Simplified. I'm a big fan of just breaking it down and make it simple. So
Yeah.
breath work, let's put it in two different buckets. There's one, breath work exercises to help you to shift into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. The autonomic nervous system makes up the parasympathetic and sympathetic. Parasympathetic is rest and digest, sympathetic is fight or flight. Or we could also think of it as a more alert or energetic state. We can think of states as there only being two states of being. There's a powerful state of being, which is empowering, and there's a primal state of being that is not serving you. So, with breathwork exercises being to shift into rest and digest, this is when we would utilize most of the things most people are familiar with: 478, box breathing, cyclic sigh, anything like that that's going to be calming to your nervous system. It's great before a meeting, before a call, before a tough conversation. It's going to help to downregulate your nervous system so that you feel better, more clear. Now, on the other side, we have breathwork journeys. This is intentional to get into that sympathetic nervous system of fight or flight, which can be that traumatic release of a deep cathartic breathwork journey, say 60 minutes, like what you experienced.
Mhm.
On that side, there's also like little mini journeys, which is usually what I will lead, where I wouldn't say it's a microdose, meaning that it's just like a very small portion of that. It's a microdose plus. Like you're going to experience emotions that have been buried, but it's more of like the daily compartmentalization type stuff. And more
Mhm.
typically, it wouldn't be those deep, deep, deep traumatic events that you might not be ready for. And that's typically the sweet spot where I like to take people. And how I do that is anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes. So it's quick too. And we have a free breath club community. Every week I lead live breath work sessions. And typically with this framework, utilizing the breath method, the acronym breath, what we'll start with is grounding breaths. So that's going to help you access rest and digest. And by doing that, you're going to start to feel more safe so that you can release. It's really important to start off with grounding breathwork exercises. Then you mentioned the orchestra earlier, like we're building up towards a crescendo, and we do that with
Mm.
activating breath work like circular connected breath, which is typically the style that would be utilized to get you into those deep releases. But we're not going so deep that, it's going to release a lot of DMT in the body and
Mm.
give you that hallucinogenic trip that breathwork journey could get.
Yeah.
So Then we bring it back down with rest and digest. And I'm happy to go through all the different steps and talk about the scientific terms like transient hypofrontality that gets you into flow states and what's happening with the prefrontal cortex. But for right now, that's like a good place to start, you know?
Hmm. Well, I'm thinking like it's really helpful to have those two different categories because I think oftentimes for most people, breath work is just looped into like breath work as this umbrella. And there's just different styles or frequencies. And you think, okay, well, how do I know which one's a good fit for me? And I'm thinking for the person who's looking to put this into a practice, like for me, I kind of swore off breath work, if I'm going to be honest, after that experience because it was so, like, it wasn't intentionally negative. They meant well by it. But I think I just wasn't ready for understanding what was going to come up. But I also think to your mention earlier, even with soul life balance and the fact that you had to go into releasing trauma and releasing things that were hidden within you to be able to step into this version of you. I also recognize as part of that experience, while very uncomfortable, it was the invitation for me to be like, whoa, there's a lot sitting here that I have never touched. I've never had an awareness of, to your point of the 95%. There was so much like literally waiting underneath the surface for me to tap into and to feel. But because I'd been so much in the doing and I had never really sat with myself or my emotions, I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and then it felt like in those moments, it took 5 seconds worth of breath work for it to all come to the surface, and it feels like a lot to navigate. So I'm curious for you, when you started to kind of go into your journey with breath work, or maybe if someone's wanting to kind of unlock that aspect of themselves, they know that there's, emotions that are sitting there, or there's tension that's sitting there, or experiences that are underneath the surface that maybe haven't had enough acknowledgement or time to really work through those. How did that impact you and processing that to help you to move forward? Was it to your point, like a daily individual breath work by yourself? Or do you think that someone really kind of needs those deep, let's get into it experiences to kind of, pick the scab, if you will, to be able to make full on progress to step into that new identity?
I think we all need these deep experiences, and we get into it'll come to us when it's meant to. And I don't believe in like bad experiences. And another way to think about it is the presupposition of NLP. There is no failure, there's only feedback. Like that's
Hmm.
more from a success point of view. But like whether it's plant and earth medicines or just anything in life, like even the traumas that we experience, if we see them as a bad experience, then we're stepping into victim consciousness. But if we can
Mm.
see it as an opportunity for growth and start to get curious, which is uncomfortable and scary by design, then we start to grow. But it's in the mindset of being like, this was a bad experience or this traumatized me that can keep us stuck. For me personally, I adopt a game time mentality. And like 2023 was one of the hardest times in my life. This was 4 years deep into the spiritual journey, a year and a half after I published my fourth book, Soul Life Balance. And I felt like, again, in a different kind of way, like I had figured it out, but from a
Yeah.
more spiritual point. And then my whole reality crumbled and it became one of the hardest times in my life. And what I adopted was a game time mentality. And what that looks like is like, if I am not only curious for where I'm at, but like for your listeners, you're obviously at least curious because you're still listening to this episode and you show up for Kate's podcast, which talks about, growth. Well, if you're at least a little bit curious, then when it gets hard, adopt a game time mentality as like, this is the big game. Why would I just study or learn about this stuff and not actually apply it when I need it most? And then what's really wild is like the everyday stuff where you're just feeling that everyday stress, your kids, your job, your bills, whatever it is. It's really hard to go deep with the everyday stress. But when
Mm.
your life turns upside down, it becomes so much easier to go deep because you have no other choice. So in
Mm.
those really challenging times, if you can adopt that game time mentality, it's so empowering. I'm not sure I entirely answered your question, but that's what came up for me.
That's okay. Trust the journey. Trust the journey.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think the hard part for me has always been, do I need to have, I find I am this way as an entrepreneur. I need my back against the wall before I move. And
Mhm.
I find that, like I had to go to like the depths of burnout before I was like, okay, fine. And I would go into a new way of adopting something. And so I think for me, I was curious with the basis of soul life balance, if kind of someone needed to dive into like the depths in order to see movement, or can this be like
Oh,
a
right.
small little planting seeds each day and over time we progress? Because I do think sometimes there are those experiences that it's like, hey, this is not a, scratch the surface, chip away at it thing. This is like we're going deep into all the things, we're unlocking it, reframing it, and then giving you a new basis from which to build. And then there's other pieces in business and in life where if you want change, it is about those small seeds being planted. So I think, even for example, with breath work, I'm wondering how much of this is like if someone's feeling like version number one of both of us, like, but for myself as well as you, it kind of came from this like, I've got no other choice experience.
Hmm.
And I wonder with the practices you integrate with, entrepreneurs and people in business, do you kind of feel like that's almost needed? We need to get you to that place to unlock it. Or is this a matter of like, I can plant seeds each day and see change?
I mean, I do think that we need to get our society as a whole to this place. And I don't think we should force that upon anyone, which is why to me it's kind of like a yes and. For the
Mm,
person listening, it's like if you're feeling that resonance, if you're feeling that call for whatever it is, and you're not answering that call, you're not stepping into the hero's journey, to use Joseph Campbell's 12-step journey archetype. And it's at the beginning of going deep. But on an everyday practical, like let's just keep it practical, right? Like the small stuff. So I mentioned shifting into rest and digest with breath work to help with like a meeting or something like that. I think this is where most people get it wrong with breath work, and where most of the messaging with breath work, they just get it wrong. It's like if you're feeling that emotion or your thought that you don't want to feel, well, you need to do a calming breath work so that you feel good again. That just contributes more compartmentalization. And if you're
mm,
starting to use breath work to be like, no, I'm feeling or thinking something that I don't want to feel, so I'm just going to do some cyclic sighs or box breathing so I can feel good again, now you're bypassing. So instead of like doing that deep, deep, deep dive that you and I are talking about, it's like
yeah.
start with those little things and be like, oh, wow, I feel an emotion, call it anxiety or whatever it is coming up. Instead of using breath work to just like settle myself, why not do some circular connected breath to shift into sympathetic fight or flight so that you can actually move through it? And that's where my breath framework comes in. And just real
Mm,
quick, the B is breathe to slow down. The R is relax to feel. The shadow work comes in the third and fourth step. So step number 3 is energy to reveal, because remember, emotions are energy in motion. There's the 90-second rule that scientifically shows that we can move through them in as little as 90 seconds. So with the third step, when you're starting to really feel those emotions, and this is like, the Wim Hof style breathing that's going to help bring those emotions up to the surface. The question that we're asking ourselves is, what is this energy revealing to me? Is there a story on repeat, a limiting belief, whatever it is? The A in the breath process is accept to surrender, because most of us, when we truly ask that question, we're like, no, 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 I can't see that right now. I don't want to see that. I don't want to be with this.
mm,
And this isn't like, that deep cathartic release that's going to bring up trauma. This is just like the little small things. So it's a good training ground to be like, oh, no, no, I am safe. I am safe to breathe through this. Surrender, surrender, keep going. And then in the fifth step, we've now earned the right to invoke the power of positive thinking, because where toxic positivity comes in is it's about disassociating from how you feel and be like, no, never feel a negative thought or feel a negative emotion or think a negative thought,
mm,
always be positive. That's disassociating. So by doing the shadow work and bringing it up, we now earn the right to invoke the power of positive thinking. So with the fifth step, we transform it. That's the T, transform into an empowering belief. And then H, finally, habits to integrate. And that looks like, as a result of what came up, what action habits or behaviors can I take? And I know that's 6 steps and it seems a lot to remember. So all you need to remember is the 90-second rule teaches you can move through emotions in as little as 90 seconds. And here's what you do: 3 themes: breathe, feel, and think intentionally. And if you can just do that as your training grounds to start, that is such a safe way to start, to begin into this work. And when you're ready for that deeper release, it will come and you'll be primed and ready.
Well, I think like what you just said of even the box breathing, like you're feeling a negative emotion, everyone's like, take a deep breath. Cause it's basically a matter of like, if you breathe through it, it will go away. And I think that that's such a perspective shift because so many people use breathing as get rid of the feeling.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering for someone who's not familiar with breath work or maybe doesn't have a lot of experience in it, you talked about like the typical box breathing versus what you would recommend. So for someone who's having maybe, again, regulation is a huge part of entrepreneurship. You're having one of those moments where you're experiencing an intense feeling, whether it's sadness, if it's grief, if it's anger, frustration, whatever it might be, and they're in this moment, what is the thing not to do breathing wise versus the way that you would want them to breathe in that
Mhm.
moment?
Yeah, so I'm happy to link pre-recorded exercises so you guys can try them as well because I have a bunch on YouTube. But typically, it would be any exercise that's going to get you into rest and digest. So if you're not familiar with breath work, box breathing is probably the go-to that most people are familiar with.
Yeah.
And that's inhaling up for 4 seconds, holding your breath at the top for 4 seconds, exhaling for 4 seconds, and then holding your breath for 4 seconds at the bottom. That's one round. Just keep doing that, maybe 5 to 10 rounds, and see how you feel. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, continue. That's a box breath. Now, there are 3 basic rules of breathwork exercises, which we now know breathwork exercises are to shift you into rest and digest. The first is to breathe through your nose as opposed through your mouth. It doesn't matter if you exhale through your nose or mouth, but if you want to get into that restful state, breathe through your nose as opposed to your mouth. The second is what's called belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. And that just basically means to let the belly expand on the inhale. Imagine that you have a deflated balloon and you're putting air into that balloon. The balloon expands as you put air into it. So as you inhale, let your belly, your diaphragm expand. And then the final one is allow your exhales to be longer than your inhales. That can help with rest and digest. So the most common form of box breathing is an even box, 4 seconds all the way around. But if that's not really doing it for you, maybe you inhale for 4 seconds, maybe you hold for 6 seconds, maybe you exhale for six. And that's something you can play with, but allowing the exhales to be longer is going to help you to get into that rest and digest. Now, having said that, box breathing can be a little bit confusing if you're just hearing it right now and I'm not really guiding you through it. So, the breathwork technique that I teach the most is actually called the cyclic sigh. And there was a study by Dr. Andrew Huberman's lab at Stanford a few years ago that studied different forms of breathwork versus different forms of meditation to discover what's going to be the most beneficial to overcome stress and anxiety, not only right now, but to have lasting impact throughout my day as well. They found that the cyclic sigh is more effective than anything else. And why I love the cyclic sigh, not just because it's backed by science from that study, is because it's the easiest form of breath work to do. Kate, for you and me and all of you listening right now, like if you're running, you're on a jog, or you're driving your car or whatever, like you can breathe with us. Don't close your
Mhm.
eyes, but just sit up straight. If you're sitting down or even if you're walking, just take a big inhale through your nose, sip in a bit more air at the top through the nose, and through the mouth exhale. Like it's so easy. That's one. Just keep doing that. It's about inhaling all the way up through the nose, sipping a bit more at the top, then exhale through the mouth. Now,
Mm.
I'll get into everything else in just a minute here, but here is a ninja secret. This is the ninja version of the cyclic sigh. And when you're in conversation with someone else and you're either having those racing thoughts about what you're going to say next, because we all do it,
Yeah, I was like guilty. Yeah.
yeah, we all do it. And or you're in a heated conversation, right? What you can do is what we just did, the cyclic sigh, but instead of a big inhale through the nose and exhaling through the mouth, do it like a ninja. Be very subtle. So right now, Kate, for you and for all of you listening, I invite you to just do a subtle inhale all the way up through your nose, sipping in a bit more air at the top, then through your nose, exhale, and continue to do that. And notice as you continue to breathe like that, just like that, your thoughts start to slow down, your nervous system starting to feel relaxed. That is a great way to overcome those racing thoughts. It's a great way to regulate in
Mm,
heated conversations. And what's really fantastic about this is you are retraining your nervous system to breathe in this way, because most of the time we have choppy breaths. And so that contributes to fight or flight. So,
mm,
all of that to say, when we are first learning breath work and working through these different emotions that come up, you can utilize something like the cyclic sigh and or box breathing or something else that you may know of that gets you into rest and digest. There's a lot out there. I'm not going to go through them all right now for the sake of time. Now, a lot of times that's not going to be enough to access your subconscious mind. I mean,
yeah.
NLP is amazing. I'm a master practitioner in NLP and MER and hypnosis and all those things. And what I find with myself and some people is like, that stuff to reprogram the subconscious mind isn't enough if you're not actually getting in your body. So, for those of us that need a little bit deeper, I love to stack nervous system regulation through breath work with subconscious mind reprogramming. And that's what we're doing in this third and fourth step. So, now we're going to turn off the analytical mind of the prefrontal cortex. This is where we're putting our glasses on and getting a little nerdy with some science. Yeah, I love it.
I love
But
it.
this, yeah, it's so good. Yeah, this term transient hypofrontality, it means to temporarily shut down the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal
Mm,
cortex of the brain is the analytical and logical part of our brain. So while we are breathing in this circular connected breath, it's going to help to shut down that analytical, chatty mind so that we can access the subconscious mind and ask the question of, what is this energy revealing to me? Now,
mm,
it's a little bit trickier to teach real quick, but it's just inhaling and exhaling through your mouth, no pause between the inhale and exhale. And it's called circular connected breathing, because the circle is like, when, if you're just doing this for the first time, all I want you to do is breathe in and out of your mouth and let the belly expand on the inhale and bring the belly back to the spine on the exhale. As you continue to do this, you'll find like a wave circular like motion. Now, the
mm,
connected part is because there's no pause between the inhale and the exhale. So as you're breathing this way for just a couple of minutes, nothing too long, this is when you're going to be able to drop into your body and access your subconscious mind, and you can go
mm,
deeper. Then at the end, after gaining that clarity, and we start to transform it into an empowering belief and find out habits to integrate, now we're going to go back into rest and digest. So it's kind of like, a bell
mm.
curve of like starting
Yep.
off restful, doing the deep work, hitting the summit, and then coming back down, then
Mm,
exiting out feeling restored, more clarity, more energy, and knowing what our next step is.
mm. Okay, that practice, someone's listening, like, "Okay, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna integrate this." I love also, by the way, the breathing you can do midst an argument and the person doesn't know, because 'cause I'm like, I was doing that as you were talking and I'm like, "Wow, I just feel so great." So, I love that. But I'm thinking for the person who maybe doesn't have a lot of experience with breath work, anything that they might experience, because you mentioned in your framework the aspects of surrender. And
Mhm.
I think that, at least for myself, I can speak for myself, I found that very difficult with breath work because I could feel myself getting to a place where I was starting to feel not uncomfortable necessarily physically, but I could tell that emotions were coming up. And I was like, exactly as you said in your explanation, I was like, "Oh, I don't wanna feel this right now. I don't wanna deal with this right now. I don't have time for this." And you're doing, especially if you're doing, let's just say, listen to this and you do the breath work on a Tuesday or on a Friday morning and you're like, "I have calls today and I have this and I don't wanna feel this right now." When someone feels that coming up, what do we do? Because obviously there's physical feelings that can come up with breath work. There's obviously the emotional side. So if someone's never done this before, what can they anticipate with this style of breathing? And also, should they feel something come up, what would be your recommendation to navigate that?
I wouldn't do this on your own.
Okay.
If you're doing it on your own, like just taking what I just said and being like, "Oh, I'm just gonna like piecemeal it together," like reach out to me. I have a ton of pre-recorded videos that you can do on your own because they're guided, so it's not really on your
Mhm.
own. Or you
Mhm.
can join my breath club, which is free, and I lead breathwork sessions every single week. And I mean, not to just say I have the solution. There's a lot of other solutions out there, and it's important to find the person that resonates with you. That
Well,
is
there is a
what's
huge I do wanna add, there's a huge difference between, in my opinion, doing breath work alone versus guided, especially at the beginning, because I find when I was guided, I would start to get uncomfortable, and they'd say, "You're probably starting to feel uncomfortable right now," and I'm like, "Oh," so, like, it kind of normalizes a little bit of what's coming up, so I just wanna add that too, that I think having it guided really is such a compliment to the experience, but yeah, sorry.
No, that's great. I love lived experience. It's great for people to hear that. And when I went through my yoga teacher training, I remember I was the only guy there, one other guy there because his wife was doing it, probably like 20 people. And everyone there said, you would be really great at restorative yoga. Like you have such a relaxing, calming voice. And I've held space in over 1,000 medicine ceremonies, and I was kind of like tapped on the shoulder because of my energy. And I'd never really
Mm,
thought of myself as like being a space holder, right?
mm,
And I've come to realize like that's a superpower of mine. So when I first started facilitating breath work a few years ago, like I would go to yoga studios and do breath work journeys like what you experienced earlier, what you were talking about.
yeah.
And a lot of people didn't have that experience of like that explosion. And I would get down on myself being like, man, why aren't people having these big releases? Like, what am I
Yeah.
doing wrong? And it took me a while to realize, oh, I need to cater to my superpower. And I have like an innate essence of helping people to feel safe. So
Mm,
my thing isn't those big explosions. It's helping people to feel safe. So I know where I'm powerful. And that's why I'm like, really like, hey, if you're interested, join the Breath Club, check out these pre-recorded videos. Cause I get a lot of feedback that people do feel really safe. And, for yourself, when you're breathing, whether it's guided or you are doing on your own, whatever it is, just saying something as simple as, I am safe. I am
mm,
safe. That sends a signal to your nervous system. And that can be so helpful for you to surrender. And remember, surrender isn't the white flag. It's not giving up. It's about accepting what is without resistance. Without
mm,
resistance.
mm. When you say accepting what is without resistance, the instant thing that I came up with is as a question or a curiosity is, do you find that you ever have struggled to accept the emotion without accepting the event? Like, I'm
Mm,
thinking when it comes to breath work, oftentimes you can have, and again, there's different levels of breath work, so I also want to keep that as a mental note here for everybody. So I don't want you to feel like if you're just doing box breathing that any of this is going to come up. But when you're doing breath work, sometimes you do have experiences or really intense emotions that can come up. And I'm curious for people when you guide, do you ever find that people struggle to accept the feeling without accepting or processing the actual thing itself? Because I think sometimes we can struggle in the moments when we're, doing breath work or even just doing any inner work experience to say, okay, well, if I'm accepting this right now, it means that I'm kind of accepting the larger thing. Do you feel like breath work, when you say acceptance and when you say surrender, would you say it's really about surrendering to the physical feeling and experience is the biggest thing that you mean with that? Or more of a mindset or perspective or philosophy of surrender?
Yeah, the feeling. I mean, it can be both for sure, but if we're talking about trauma, which I think we are when you say like the
Yeah.
event, yeah, Gabor Mate said it best. Like, trauma isn't what happened to you, it's what happened inside you as a result of what happened to you. When we get latched on to the event, it keeps us in an avoidance place and from good intentions, right? And safe
Mhm.
intentions. But to really like move past it, we have to move past the event and realize like, this is within us, and how am I feeling towards this event, and how do I want to feel about it or moving forward. With plant and earth medicine ceremonies, they say 90% of the work lies in the integration. The experience itself of the release with the medicine is 10%. If we're talking about
Mm.
deep cathartic breathwork journey, like that release, I approach it the same way. 90% of the work is in the integration. So you had this peak experience in breath work. Maybe you felt what the yogis would call samadhi and ultimate bliss. Most people do at some point in the journey. Maybe you experience a suppressed or repressed memory of a traumatic event. Whatever happened, so what? That was an experience. It was another experience. What are you going to do differently moving forward in your life? One of my favorite words is embodiment. And it just just keeps everything to the forefront of my awareness of like, how do I want to show up for myself and how do I want to show up for others? If I am prioritizing these things, if I'm talking about these things, am I truly embodying it? And when
Mm,
I can focus on embodying my own values, everything else just falls into place because I'm not out of alignment, which means I'm not out of integrity with myself. And when you
mm.
focus on that, you're not bypassing or avoiding the traumatic event or whatever it was coming up. You're doing something about it to improve upon yourself.
Mm. And I think one of the, at least I find, the powers of breath work is the fact that it kind of helps you to see things. And I find that typically with through moving through it through breath work, you're able to see it typically in a safe environment and then you come out of it and I feel like, at least for myself and for a lot of my peers we've talked about it, you can't unsee. Like once you have this aha moment of whatever it may be, it could be a clarity piece about business, it could be trauma, it could be, that blissful moment as you spoke about. But once you have that light bulb, you kind of come out of breath work and you go into the rest of your day and you just have this level of awareness and understanding of something or an event or something, and you try to move forward and you kind of can't unsee. You kind of, almost to your point, have constant invitation after that to embody, to heal yourself because you've brought something to a different level of awareness that you didn't have before. So
Mhm.
I found for myself and a lot of my peers, we were talking about it, about the fact that like breath work is so revealing because there's so many things it brings to the surface for you that you then can't unsee. And so you have this constant decision each day of like, I'm going to actively not do anything about this,
Mm.
or I'm going to use this as an invitation to say, okay, exactly to your point, where can I like deeper embody this within my life?
Yeah, and looking at those patterns, I think it's awesome that you use the word revealing because, as I mentioned, that's the third step, right? Like energy to reveal. What is this revealing to me? It's learning about yourself at a deeper level and doing something about it
Mhm.
for sure.
And it's free. Like,
Yeah,
it's free. Like,
yeah.
obviously, you could pay for a breathwork coach, but aside from that, like, your breath is free, which is why it's so exciting. So, okay, today, high level, obviously, we've gone into unpacking your story, which is a great showcase for so many people who may actually be at that version you right now. Going into, again, having those invitations and how we can dive into this, understanding soul life balance, the different habits that are integrated, breathwork being one of those. Someone feels like, okay, like I am very activated from everything you guys talked about today, but I also feel very overwhelmed because maybe I've never done breath work. I feel like I am in version 1 or I'm exploring version 2, but I don't really know where to start. Of all the things, I know you have so much in your book, and by the way, guys, we are giving away copies of his book in our free community. So as a side note, if you want to dive into all of his things, we will be doing that. But if somebody is wanting to start to kinda, I guess, have an action plan, and I know that kinda defeats the whole idea of being, because this is back into the doing bucket now, but if we're
Training
wanting to
wheels,
make
hey?
this yeah, if
Yeah.
we're wanting to make this
Training wheels.
practical for somebody after listening today, and you're, think of her as a really driven, go, go, go female, entrepreneur, where does she start? Because she has this pull, she has the calling to a different way of doing business in life, but also feels like there's a million and one tools. She's very low on time and already has felt like she's tried things before, but yet still kind of, circles around burnout from time to time. So, where do we even start to integrate this work and make it really practical?
Number one, put it on your calendar because, as you know, and you probably live by, if
Yeah,
it's not on your calendar, it
it's
doesn't
not
exist.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's not happening. So put it on your calendar. And a great business coach taught me this years ago. Just reschedule it if you don't do it at that time and hold yourself accountable to it.
Mm,
I think the best thing you can do, though, is put it on your calendar early morning. If you have kids or whatever the situation is, maybe wake up a little bit earlier. I would definitely recommend doing this like before you're really on and in mom mode or boss mode and diving into your work. And
mm,
I would do that cyclic sigh for 2 minutes. Like there's absolutely zero excuse why, and this listening, like there's no excuse why you can't try either box breathings, the cyclic sigh, or something like that. That's a breath work exercise, nothing activating, nothing scary, just something to start your day with, even at the very minimum, 3 deep intentional breaths. But put it on your calendar for the next 3 days. Notice how that feels. And then because the the women listening to your show take action, y'all know how to do habit stacking. You know how to build on these habits. If you
Yeah.
just get started, then you can do more and more and more and more. And then obviously, if you want to join my breath club community, it's free, right? Breathwork's free, and I'm teaching you for free.
Yeah.
So yeah,
There's
it's
literally no excuse to not do it at this point. Yeah.
totally. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then I'll send you a video, Kate. It's on my YouTube channel. It's like 8 minutes guided breath work. It walks through those 6 steps in 8 minutes.
Amazing.
That one I do myself, which side note, I had to get, having done like probably 1,000 of my own podcasts over the past 8 years and listening to them when I was early on, like I'm a little bit better, like with listening to my own voice, like on a podcast, but
Yeah.
it did take me a while to be like, man, this is weird to listen to myself lead breath work. And I'm like, man, if people knew this, they'd probably think I was weird too. And I was like, you know what? Let all that go. And I was like, I do my own breath work because I
Yeah.
like the style, right? I
Yeah.
don't find anything else out there. So anyways, put it on your calendar, because if it's not on your calendar, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that tells me also too, which is the great part about it, is that you can start small. Like I will be honest, when I first got introduced to breathwork, I remember being at the event and I was like Amazoning, like what is that called? Like a eye I'm like an
The eye
eye
mask.
mat,
Yeah.
yeah, like an eye mask or an eye cover, and I was getting like a yoga mat, and I was like, I'm gonna like have this like little situation in my house. Tell me how I never used any of that, and I would start doing breath work, like you're saying, in the car, on a walk. Like you just realize how much it can be integrated within your life, and I think part of the thing that kept me when I first got introduced to it from integrating it regularly was making it this big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the beautiful parts that I love about anybody that teaches breath work and about introducing it to people is how accessible it is. And the fact that you literally need nothing. You don't need to spend on anything. You can join Sam's free community and you can learn how to use this tool that you're going to live with for the rest of your life as a tool to regulate, to tap into emotions, to heal yourself. Like it's just, there's like an endless opportunity with it. So I really, really recommend if someone is wanting to make this part of a practice, also being around other people who normalize it. When I did breath work, I came home and people were like, "You're doing what?" And I was like, "I'm deep breathing in my basement," to a guy who prompts me on breathing. And they were like, "Okay." And so I started to do it in the morning and then I would do it before bed with my headphones. And it was something that so many people didn't understand because I wouldn't say it's super like Wim Hof definitely made it more streamlined than I think it was prior to that. But I think it's also really helpful to have, just like anything else community wise, a community of people who are looking to integrate this as part of their life as well, because it starts to really help you to have a place to go work on that, because it's not something I feel like a lot of people are as educated about, at least in like most of society.
Totally. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Yeah. So Sam, this was so good. If somebody wants to dive more into your work or learn more about your frameworks and your approaches, like where is the best place for them to connect with you and to dive in?
Yeah, my website has everything. So
Okay.
samkabert.com. That's KAB as in boy, ERT. And real quick, I'll give the summary, just a quick little takeaway. So if you didn't write this down already, now would be a great time to pull out your phone, your notepad, or whatever, and write down the 90-second rule. Your subconscious will remember what that is. Just think emotions are energy in motion, and then write down breathe, feel, think intentionally. So when emotions come up, remember the 90-second rule, and to breathe, feel, think intentionally. That summarizes pretty much everything we talked about.
Amazing. Amazing. All right, you guys. Well, you have your homework. So, as a side note, as I mentioned, we are going to be giving away a couple copies of Sam's book inside our Ambitious Network. So, it's a free community. If you guys love all the conversation today and you want to dive more into his stuff, we'll be giving away a couple copies in there. But as always, you guys, we'll see you next week. And as always, stay ambitious.